execute this file, we get a question, how is your day? Because the auto command was triggered. Okay, mostly. And if we change this to goodbye, sad to see you go. Well, alright. Of course, it's a bit of a contrived example, but you could do some clever things. Rails.vim used this for a while to provide customizations. For example, with Rails.vim, if you wanted to customize the plugin in some way, you could do autocommand user Rails, and then do whatever you want. So whenever the Rails plugin is initialized for a buffer, you would trigger this code, which was pretty useful in some cases. I think I still maybe use it for some things. Actually, we can grab for Rails. Not sure. Oh, grep hasn't warmed up. Right, so okay, so it's not actually Rails, it's both enter Rails. Fair enough. And if this out command is triggered, I define a buffer local command called routes, routes, which just opens up config.rb. So there's that. But yeah, theoretically you can use it for anything you want. Now, this was the basics that I just wanted to go over, which most of you probably knew already. I'm gonna talk about some interesting autocommands that I use. And it would be nice to hear some examples afterwards, maybe from everybody else. One of the most basic ones that pretty much everybody probably knows is the white space cleanup command, autocommand. So basically, before we write the buffer, we want to remove all trading white space. So we just put a global substitute on the entire buffer for white space at the end of the line, and we replace it with nothing. The E at the end is just so we don't have an error if we happen to not have trading white space, as we should. So if I execute this, well, you can't really see the result. Maybe I could, not to mention that I have it built in my Vim files anyway, so you're not going to see anything different. But yeah, this is one pretty simple way to do it. Of course, this doesn't keep your cursor position, so you might want to expand it a bit. I have something a bit more complicated, like I check a custom variable, just so I can disable it if I really want to. And then I call command, and the command actually saves the Windows state and blah blah, but you get the idea. This is also a very popular one, and that probably the first couple of lines that everybody pastes in their vimrc. Basically, every time after a buffer was read, just check if we have a mark for the last cursor position, and we position ourselves in that place. So that if you open a buffer, you're at your last remembered position. And this is the standards, these are the classics, I'd say. Something interesting that I made for myself, which is probably also findable in some in wikis or something like that, is, okay, if you're entering a buffer via edit or new or whatever, or you're entering Vim for the first time, then we call this function, maybe enter directory, which gets the file name as an argument. Now if you take a look at this, it's pretty simple actually. Give it the file name as an argument, and if we do have a file name, because maybe we're opening a new buffer, and this file name happens to be a directory, just cd to it, So by doing this, I could say vim berlin talk, for instance, this directory, and then if I pwd, you will see that my current working directory is this one. And this is pretty useful if I'm just editing a project directory or something, and I'm already cd'd into it, without needing to go there first. Then there's the ensure directory exists. This one is created when I happen to create a new file. It works like this. Let's say I create a new file called test food. Now the test directory doesn't exist. This happens every once in a while. Maybe I forgot to create it, or maybe I'm too lazy. So I want to create a Ruby file in a directory called tests, and now this will ask me, well, the directory doesn't exist. You want to create it? Sure, why not? Because hey, maybe I made a mistake. And there is the test directory with the full file. And the implementation is pretty simple as well. Basically, In this case, I don't give the file name as an argument because I need to modify it anyway. So I just take the current buffer name, I use the H modifier. The H modifier takes the head of the current file name. So %:H will take the head, which would be the last path component removed, aka the directory. They could have just said the directory. That would have been more useful. Anyway, so if it happens to be directory, if it doesn't happen to be a directory, well, maybe you want to create it. So ask a confirmation message, and if the confirmation function returns true, then if it doesn't return true, then bail out. Otherwise, create a directory with some error handling. And the last one is probably the most complicated. But so far, it's pretty simple. This is very standard stuff. It's like it feels like some of this should maybe be even default, but it's pretty simple to build, which is why I assume it's not. The last one I do is fairly complicated, and there's something very specific to me, let's say. And this is, I think, a good example of the weird shit that you could do with autocommands. Every time I write a file, I try to save some stats about it. Now, first of all, I check if I'm in the home directory, because if you're not in the home directory, there's bail out. This is only for files in my home directory. Then I check if there is a file called stats.filename.csv. And then I do some magic here, and I'm going to show you how the resulting file, stats.csv, looks like. It has a line count and a date. Basically, every time I save my notes file, I keep a CSV as to how many lines it was, because I'm really bad at keeping the number of lines like to a small number. I happen to add a lot of things in my notes file. It might be obvious, like it's, I don't know, 170. It's very depressing. And you can graph that in a pretty chart afterwards.
So
you like your backlog, or
sort of, yeah. Not very useful in general. I can see that, but this is sort of what I mean. It's like autocommands are pretty versatile to do whatever crazy things you feel like. So yeah, this is the basic examples I want to change now. And the what I wanted to talk about is a small project I've been playing about. Now, so far I've been showing you mostly buff write autocommands, which are pretty simple. Like whenever you open a buffer or whenever you write like a buffer or something like that. And there are a few more fine-grained ones, like cursor moved and cursor moved I. If you take a look at them, basically these are triggered every time the cursor gets moved. In this case, in normal mode, which happens very often. So you don't really want to put too many things in it, but it's a pretty powerful autocommand. Same thing for cursor moved I, which is the same thing in insert mode. Now theoretically, you can do some pretty crazy stuff there. For example, if you take a look at, I'm wondering if I should show the point, I use automatic completion. For example, if I type function, it shows me a completion bubble automatically, and this happens by listening to the cursor moved I autocommand. And if on cursor moved, if the last word matches a particular pattern, just show me this. Of course, it's more complicated than that. The plugin is not exactly simple. But it works. It works every time. Yeah, clean, and on every typing thing, it basically filters it down. And another pair of interesting ones is insert enter and insert leave. Every time you enter insert mode, insert enter is triggered. Every time you leave it. So if you enter it with I or with C or in any other way, you get an insert enter out of that. Insert leave is when you just escape or get out of insert mode in any other way. So I have these autocommands, and what I wanted to do with them is I wanted to achieve, let's say you have this HTML tag. What I wanted to do is change the span to a div, let's say, and then automatically change the closing tag to the div as well. So, surprisingly enough, I actually got it working, sort of. so div, and then div changes. Span, and then changes to span.
Can you say class, please?
So what?
Can you rename it to class and rename it back?
Well, the indentation is not exactly correct, but
Okay.
but no, it doesn't do a global insertion place. I'm not.
I just wanted to know.
But yeah, good catch though, good catch. No, that would have been easy actually. That I should have done that because that would have been the easy way out. But no, I wanted to do it the hard way. I wanted to feel the pain. So I felt like playing around with autocommands and trying to figure out what I'm actually doing here. When am I changing what?
Interesting
So-
would be nested diffs.
Yes. But, I'm waiting for the next example.
And that's the class?
Well, that didn't
No!
work, no.
Because of the closing tag.
Because
Oh, it is.
the closing tag was. I'm assuming because it's one letter. I'm going to get into implementation. It's a work in progress, as I said.
Yeah.
Use for this?
Well, this is great. At least this is
Yeah, it's
working.
awesome. What did you use for this?
It's working. I'm going to show you.
Come on, show it.
It's sort of working.
It's good enough.
Potential bug.
Ship it!
So here's the thing. This is actually surprisingly hard to do. You'd think that it's enough to say, okay, when you enter insert mode and when exit insert mode, do this thing, right? Just listen to event maybe. Not so easy. One, because if you actually use I to enter insert mode, you get the insert enter event, and you're good. This is good. You can now say, okay, the user enter insert mode. I'm going to remember this position, and then when the user leaves insert mode, I'm going to remember this position, and now I'm going to look for what changed between them. The problem is, this works for I, it doesn't work for C. For example, if you type CW, insert enter is triggered not before the C, but after the C. So you now lose the text.
Okay.
So not so useful. So in order to get this to work, I had to pull this off with the insert leave for the I's and the whatever. And with C, I actually overrode the C mappings so that I could listen to them and be able to actually trigger like an event. And then there's a bunch of other logic. Let's say if it's a C, I don't even remember what kind of edge cases I went into. Let's just say it was pretty complicated. Had to get some typo ahead, feed the C mapping afterwards, and blah blah. But it sort of works. But the problem is, it is pretty cumbersome. It does override the C mapping, and this resulted in some pretty strange bugs actually that are not exactly easy to debug. When you're writing the C mapping, it's not exactly easy to notice. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and you're like, did I press it wrong, or is it just my plugin that is messing things up? So I was very excited very recently when I learned that there's a new autocommand, newish, which is called TextChanged. Now, TextChanged. It looks pretty promising. Basically, after a change was made to the text, any change at all in the current buffer, basically when b change tick has changed, this autocommand command is triggered. This is triggered very often. Obviously, don't do stupid things. Of course, we are going to do stupid things, but
Which version did
it's I'm not sure actually. I think it's some 7.4. I think I can help. Version 7.4 actually. Text changed. Here it is, and it's in version. It's in 7.4. I'm not sure what the patch level actually, but it has been added in 7.4. So this is pretty promising, and I have an experimental branch in which I use this TextChanged autocommand, and it looks much better in terms of autocommands actually, because this is it now. There's no overriding C. This you can ignore for now, but the whole But now you just need to say TextChange and just do your magic. Right, and make a change object and trigger a user autocommand. The rest of it, just to explain you how this thing works, is basically every time a change is made, however I detect it, I trigger an autocommand called onChange, and then the actual implementation of the HTML attacks So this is, I tried to do this in a sort of generic way because I wanted to also use it for other things, like for example renaming arguments of functions or whatever, and let's say it automatically cascades. Which is why this is a specific implementation. We just listens to this, takes the last change object and sort of does its magic, like it flips to the new state, takes the tag, searches for it, blah blah. It's still pretty complicated, which is very annoying. It's so this was one of the learnings I had, that Vim is very good at making atomic operations. So if you're this entire process of change the word to foo and then it's changed to foo, this is an atomic operation that you can undo, you can redo. It's very it's a very useful concept in Vim, and this is why I was so excited about having a text change command that basically says, yeah, this you made an atomic change, now you can do things with it. But it turns out it's not so simple because it's very hard to figure out what the change was. Because technically you can have a pretty a multi-line change, you can press enter, you can use the arrow keys to just jump around and do whatever. So, well, not so easy. But for this use case, I sort of pulled it off, but it's still way more complicated than I wish it was. But these are, this is a different topic. The more interesting thing I want to talk about is the TextChanged autocommand, and sort of try to explain how it works. So maybe you can play around with it as well and tell me why I'm not getting it right. See, the whole deal is the text change is triggered every time the undo state, the tick changes. So for example, in this case, if I have, this is the most basic autocommand that you could do to debug it. You have an autocommand text changed, and you echo the changed tick. Right? So if I execute this, and I changed 1, 2, 3 to 1, 4, 3, when I escape, it should output the changed tick. Unfortunately, it doesn't. This was, I can swear this was working a couple of days ago.
Did trigger messages? Because earlier you had to call messages to see the messages?
Fair enough, but no, it's not this.
Sorry.
Because surprisingly enough, if you actually, however, if you undo now,
What?
so this is this is correct behavior in the sense that undoing is in fact a text change.
Yeah.
So this is good behavior. The problem is that the forward work doesn't seem to work, and as I said, I can swear to you that it was working. I have no idea what I'm doing over here. I'm not sure if it's a bug or if I'm somehow not putting this up correctly. So this is kind of disappointing. I apologize for this.
Do you have your plugin loaded? Your own change? Maybe there's an
There's
error.
some sort of bug there. No, I tried debugging it last night, but no, this is not it. I tried to even comment it. Well, I can even finish it, I guess. There are for reaction messages. Yeah, no reaction. If I write, however, you do get the change number. Possibly because of the white space cleaning autocommand, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's all very, very fuzzy. A fun thing to do is type autocommand text changed, and you actually see all the text changed autocommands that are currently hooked into it. So this is one thing I haven't tried debugging. Maybe this is it. This is the plugin I've been using, which is pretty cool. But notice that the match parent plugin, which is built into Vim, uses text change. I'm assuming this was the reason it was added. I didn't actually follow the conversation in the mailing list. But you can see all the autocommands. I tried disabling all of them except this one, and it still doesn't seem to work. But hey, I don't know. It could be a temporary thing because I do compile my own Vim master, so I may be in a bad state. So there you go. But the point is, the command is there, the command is there, and it looks promising. Hopefully they'll clean up any kinks. But it's still surprisingly hard to use, especially because of the undo stuff. Because theoretically, the undo stuff should be, should provide a benefit. Because you do want to trigger this command as undo. Undo is a change to the text. Sadly, this means that this causes some issues with, for example, with my plugin, because you can't just listen to, if you just listen to the event and you start changing things in the buffer, then the undo state is now kind of different, and you mess things up a bit. And especially if someone is going backwards in time and undoing, you now need to understand this, that this is happening, and adapt your logic to change the HTML tags to the correct thing. So, also not very easy to pull off. And yeah, this is basically all I wanted to talk about today. Hope there has been something useful out of this. And yeah, thanks a lot for listening. Are there any questions? Or should we rest and go get some beers?
I want your white space cleaning trick because later you will see when I present my vimRC that I have a fairly more complicated thing in mind. So maybe mine is better because it works for me, but maybe we need to talk later.
Maybe we need to talk.
This sounds like an intervention. Okay. Yeah.